It is with great pleasure that I introduce Dr. Renuka David, who made this event possible. An MBBS graduate, she dons many avatars: a loving wife, a doting mom, gracious host, an entrepreneur, a doctor, professional speaker, a TV host, a TEDx speaker, panelist, and wellness expert. She's the managing director of the Radiant Medical Services that provides trained health aides and nurses for hospitals and home care services. And she holds the prestigious annual Radiant Wellness Conclave, which addresses all aspects of well-being. Dr. Renuka also hosts an inspirational talk show in the Good News Television and her YouTube channel, and is a recipient of the Jaguar Women's Achievers Award 2014 and India's Most Exceptional Speaker Award in the field of healthcare and wellness by the Human Rights Council of India. I now call upon a valuable committee member, Ms. Priya Gautam, to introduce Dr. Shashi Tharoor.
Good morning. So the topic today is inquisitive mind. The mind is a multifarious farrago of inexplicities, mixed in with liberal dose of lucidity. It is truly the ultimate masterpiece of beauty, complexity, and purpose. And no mind is more astounding than that of our honored guest this morning. A nation builder, a diplomat, an author, and for most of us here, I'm sure, an unexampled and irreplaceable Dr. Tharoor. I could tell you that he completed his PhD in International Relations and Affairs at the age of 22, or that he led the team responsible for peacekeeping operations in the former Yugoslavia, spending considerable time on ground during the civil war there. He was a pioneer in using social media as an instrument of political interaction, recipient of several prestigious awards that include a Commonwealth Writers' Prize and a Pravas Bharatiya Samman, India's highest honor for overseas nationals. He is currently serving as a member of the Parliament, Lok Sabha from Thiruvananthapuram. Chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on External Affairs and All India Professional Congress of the INA. I could enumerate the 17 best-selling works of fiction and non-fiction that he authored, but I'm quite sure that we're all very well versed with his life, the legends and the copious amounts of his perceptible triumphs. And so, without further ado, good morning, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. My fervent mind and that of the audience truly thank you for allowing them in your august presence. The lectern is all yours.
May I please request Dr. Shashi Tharoor and Ms. Renuka David to the dais.
My third good morning to all. I belong to a profession that Dr. Tharoor would describe as somatic decrepitude mender, and in common parlance, a medical doctor.
I didn't hear your words properly except for the decrepitude, which is very unkind.
Okay. On behalf of FICCI Flow Chennai chapter, Dr. Tharoor, I must say we've all been waiting for this morning, and all of us are super excited about this.
Good to be with you, and again, sorry about the wait.
Absolutely. So, I'd love to begin my conversation with you with my first question. You've been NRI longer than you stayed in India.
That's true.
So it would be interesting to know, in your perception, how India has changed living here than living abroad over the years.
Well, I left, before some of you were born, I left in 1975 to go to graduate school in the States, and though I used to come back annually for holidays here and visiting my parents and so on, I really moved back only at the very end of 2008, early 2009. And I must say that in many ways it was an India transformed. First, the most visible things, and those of you who are slightly closer to my vintage will remember that we were a country where imports were very rare, everything we were self-sufficient, the only cars on the roads were ambassadors and Fiats, and the visual transformation into a country where literally, we have been globalized, our economy has been globalized, is certainly very striking. And not to mention, of course, the fact that NRIs always used to be solicited for bringing back suitcases full of foreign consumer goods, which you couldn't get in India, and now that's no longer required because obviously everything is available here. I think the other thing is, though poverty still persists in our country, there's very much less of it, and I think that is more and more visible. Beggars, for example, were a far more ubiquitous sight in the India I grew up in than the India I've come back to. On the negative side, everything from corruption to traffic has got much worse. I am pleased to say that when I was a child, I think it was entirely possible for my family to claim that it had never been involved in any corrupt acts during my childhood. But by the time I started coming back, bribes started needing to be paid for all sorts of things that in the past were considered routine services, from getting a telephone connection, talking about the 80s and early 90s, to even buying movie tickets in a full house. The black market had grown, bribes seemed to be widely required, and that was a bit chastening to come back and see the extent to which that's happened. And then I came into a profession where, alas, there is even more of that sort of thing than one would want to see in a democracy. So there have been a few negatives as well, but the thing about India is everything gets better and worse at the same time. So I think one can look at the evident prosperity, the self-confidence of the society, the aspirations of the youth, the visible signs of liberalization, all of that as positives, and one can look at some of these things, the traffic, the corruption, the cheapening of public discourse, all of that as negatives.
You have been a diplomat for 23 years in the United Nations, having
29,
served in...
I'm afraid.
29, sorry, I stand corrected. Served in various capacities, We know that the United Nations, according to your own words, stands for a world in which different nations and cultures look at each other as potential partners pursuing common objectives. Well, in 2006, you were chosen as India's official candidate for the post of Secretary General, a moment of pride for all of us Indians. And then you decided to come back to India, campaign in your mundu in the hot streets of Kerala to win this amazing election in 2009. Quite a contrasting picture of a UN diplomat, three-suited, sitting in his AC office, to an Indian politician. So how did this happen? What is the urge? And what is your definition, the three definitions of the NRI?
Oh, okay. That's a lot of questions in one. But on the how did it happen, first of all, you are, as usual, too kind. You left out all the bad stuff. So, yes, I was the official candidate, but I also lost. And losing is what brought me back, in the sense that though I did come rather close by just 2 votes to Ban Ki-moon, as Groucho Marx used to say, close but no cigar. So I didn't get the cigar, and though he was gracious enough to invite me to remain, I felt it more appropriate not to cast a shadow on the person who had won the post, and was better to come back and try and do something different. So that's very simply the reason for the choice. I did actually spend an intervening year and a bit in the private sector as a consultant to a company that was trying to promote investments into India, and to itself explore investments in India. But I found that I was basically rather unmoved by the bottom line. That never was what motivated me. And so the opportunity to instead come and make a difference to my own country, as I had tried to make a difference on the global arena, was, I thought, worth doing, and that's why I came back. But you're right, the transformation was quite something. In fact, my political opponents at the time in that election, my principal opponents are the communists, who had held a seat in the 2 previous elections. And they went around saying essentially that, look at this chap, he's used to sitting in air-conditioned offices in suits and ties. How can he speak for us? How can he represent us? He barely speaks the language, all of this stuff. So that actually turned out to be the easiest campaign to refute, because I was quite comfortable in a munda and kurta. I used to wear one on previous visits home, and I would happily trudge from corner to corner and shop to shop and field to field in the hot sun of April, hottest month of the year in Kerala. And I would speak to them in Malayalam and say, they say I can't speak Malayalam, but, and it's true, I really can't speak the flowery Sahitya Malayalam of all the political speech makers. But as you can see, I speak enough Malayalam to understand your hopes and your problems and your needs. And far more important than Malayalam, I can speak English and Hindi to get your voices heard in Delhi, which is what they needed. And that turned out to be a very effective argument. I did win by a record majority, and they didn't try that stunt against me again. But you also left out the fact that my second election wasn't quite so easy. I scraped through, I had won by a lack of votes the first time. And in the height of the BJP Modi wave last election, I scraped through by 15,700. It was a much tougher election. And the BJP came second, not the communists. So it's a 3-cornered constituency. And the challenge I face in the next 6 months is precisely to keep my head above not 1, but 2 rivals for that seat. On the NRI issue, I did live abroad for a very long time, because in addition to those 29 years at the UN, I had 3 years as a graduate student. And then, as I said, a year and a half, almost 2 afterwards. So cumulatively, almost 34 years of my life were spent abroad, and that's still more than half my life. So it is a rather long stint of being an NRI. So in one of my books, India from Midnight to the Millennium, I asked the question whether NRI, for non-resident Indian, stands for not really Indian or never relinquished India, because in fact there is a little bit of both. In most of the Desi expatriates you meet, they have in some respects become more like the countries they're living in rather than Indians themselves, but in other respects they haven't let go and even if they've changed their passports, their hearts are very much still in India. Then as we continued working with NRIs and the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas took off, and these various awards and engagements with the NRI community, their investments in India increased, and they also became very influential lobbyists for us in the countries where they were living. I said in a new article later, actually, maybe we should simply call them the National Reserve of India.
That's the third coining, National Reserve of India. I love that. Okay. So now, this is a question which I have coined suitably, just for the comfort level for all of us. We are aware that you have been through a lot of ups and downs, not only in your professional life, but in your private life. You've been under the national scanner for a very long time, and yet you have been managing this resultant stress so admirably. It's actually admirable, because every time I've been reading your tweets, I've been reading about you, there are a lot of people trolling about your personal life, but yet I see you admirably handling the stress well. So what are your, how do you manage the stress so well?
Well, I think honestly, the only thing that helps is a clear conscience. When you know that the various things you're being attacked for are simply not true, and that the malice, jealousy, hostility, envy of others is more their problem than yours, you learn to ignore it. It didn't come easily. Initially, like everybody else in this room would be, I was also terribly hurt by being suspected of things I was incapable of doing, and worse, being accused of things I was incapable of doing. And initially, your reaction is to lash back and defend yourself, and then you realize that actually is the point, and that's what they want you to do. So part of being in public life in the country today, particularly in this venomous era of social media, has been growing a thicker skin. You know, when I was at the UN, my late boss, Kofi Annan, the then Secretary General, once told me a Ghanaian proverb his father had taught him. And I couldn't understand it. He said the proverb is, when the sharks bite you, do not bleed. Now, the Ghana being a coastal state, I suppose you went out swimming and the sharks were there. But I couldn't understand how, if the sharks bite you, of course you bleed. How will you not bleed? And then I came here and went through all these Agni Parikshas, and I realized what he meant. That when these nasty, malicious, frankly evil people bite you, if you bleed, that is, if you show them you are suffering, you are actually giving them exactly what they want. The sharks bite you because they want your blood. If you refuse to bleed, the sharks might one day lose interest in biting you. This hasn't happened yet in my case. They're still biting me. But for that, as I say, you know, having a clear conscience helps. Having some faith in oneself and what one is and one's own integrity, that helps. And then I was reminded of a bit of advice I got from Mr. Natwar Singh, who had given up a career in the Indian Foreign Service to become a minister. And he was recounting to me how, when he was sworn in by Mrs. Indira Gandhi, he was wearing a Western suit. So he very apologetically said to her, Mrs. Gandhi, I get some bangalas stitched. And she said, no, Natwar, you better grow a thicker skin. And that piece of advice has lasted with me since.
Dr. Tharoor, I have really greatly admired the stirring speech you won at the Oxford Union debate. This 8-minute speech actually, I think, touched a lot of Indians' life, and it did a lot of soul searching. I guess not only for us Indians, but also I guess it showed the present British their past. So how did this actually, I also read that you were not very happy with the response because you had made better speeches, and then you were surprised how the 8-minute thing got so viral. So was it the reason of this book that you wrote after that, and what is the urge behind this?
Actually, it was just accidental. I was actually going to the UK for another reason, the annual Hay on Wild Literature Festival, which is one of the, perhaps the biggest literature festival in the English-speaking world until Jaipur came along. And and it really is a lovely event. I've been going there on and off for over 25 years. So they invited me, and I was going to go there. And then Oxford, perhaps hearing I was coming, wrote asking if I'd participate in their union debate on the topic, their topic, not mine. Does Britain owe reparations, or Britain does owe reparations to her former colonies? Now, I usually live with my sister in London, and she said we can drive to Hay via Oxford. It's not even out of the way. So I said, fine. And I went there, and it was a fun occasion because you speak in this very imposing 16th century oak-paneled room, and there's all these stiff formalities and so on. And the debate usually has one student on each side and three, adults or celebrities or VIPs or whatever they are, relating to the topic. And the topic was of interest to me because it gave me an opportunity to vent on British colonialism. So I said, fine. I went there and I said I'll speak, obviously, for the motion, not because I was a fan of reparations. I'm not, because reparations are a monetary idea, and I don't think you can put a monetary value on the enormous lives lost. There were 35 million Indians who died, unnecessary deaths and British-made famines, the vast amount of loot and rapine and pillage that took place, the destruction of Indian industries, handicrafts, cotton, linen, muslin, all of that took place under the British. And so I said, reparations were not my thing. In fact, even in my speech, I said, if you were to give £1 a year in reparations for 200 years to make up for 200 years of wrongdoing, that might be a case of moral atonement that would be more useful to all of us. But anyway, so I didn't go for the reparations, but to lay the case out against colonialism. I had a great time, and we did so well with the audience that in Oxford they vote by moving into two lobbies. So the people who vote for the motion after listening to the debate move into one lobby, and the ones who oppose it move into another. And practically everybody wanted to go into the lobby supporting our motion, with the result that the reception afterwards got delayed by half an hour because everyone was trying to squeeze into one room. Anyway, to cut a long story short, the debate went fine. Then I went off to Hay and forgot about it. 3 weeks later, the Oxford Union put the debate on YouTube, and they happened to have each individual speech in its own slot on YouTube rather than the entire debate together. So I retweeted my bit, and to my astonishment, I just watched it go viral. I mean, within I think 24 hours, about 3 million people had viewed it.
Schools were playing it in their auditoriums. Colleges were playing your speech in the auditoriums.
I'm sorry? Yeah. Schools and colleges were indeed playing the speech in auditoriums. One university, the Central University of Jammu, organized a full day-long seminar on this one speech. It became an extraordinary thing, and it's, as you know, even the Speaker of the House and the Prime Minister, no less, found themselves praising the speech, saying, we have someone who has said the right thing in the right place at the right time, in the Prime Minister's words, and I was obviously very gratified by all of that. But at the same time, in addition to being gratified by that, my publisher called me and said, you got to make this into a book. So I said, don't be silly, what's the point? Everyone knows this already. He said, no, they don't know it already, because if they did, your speech wouldn't have gone viral, which actually did make sense. So I rashly agreed to take it on. But it's one thing to make a 10-minute speech. It's quite another to write a solid book that substantiates each of your arguments with contemporary research, with an awareness of what the latest state-of-the-art thinking is on these issues, with the appropriate footnotes and citations. So it turned out to be a bigger chore than I had planned, but it turned out in the end, as I was saying to you this morning, to be my most successful book of all time in hardback, because it continues to sell. Normally, within a few months of a hardback book coming out, it goes into paperback. But this book has never gone into paperback, except the pirates, of course, have done it. But the actual official edition of the book is now in its 30th reprint in hardback, and people are continuing to buy it and read it. So it's a very satisfying, gratifying feeling that this book has struck such a chord amongst people in India. And even the international edition, the British edition, which is under the title Inglorious Empire, was a bestseller in Britain, and it's continued to do reasonably well in the West. So it's been, to that degree, a significant contribution to opening people's mind and eyes about the fact that the empire about which they had been so complacent in talking about things like, oh, it was a very benign act, we civilized the natives, we brought them into the modern world, we gave them the railways, all of this talk. I was able to lay those arguments to rest, I hope, pretty definitively.
I thought you did a very good job, pretty good job.
Thank you.
Dr. Tharoor, from being more individualistic, India is becoming more responsible towards community and its thinking. Like we have Swachh Bharat campaign, grow more trees, save water, proper waste disposal, and a lot of environment awareness. In your opinion, we used to be a community where we would keep our house clean, but we would not hesitate to throw our garbage across the wall to the street, and that would be our culture. Things are changing. So in your opinion, are we at the right pace, and are we really seeing the change?
I don't think we're changing as much as you've said you are. I would like to believe we are. We should. In fact, more than 15 years ago, I wrote a column in The Hindu, which then found itself and its way into some textbooks, in which I made precisely the point that you've just made, that we are a very clean people, for the most part, who live in immaculate homes and shower twice a day, but we think nothing of throwing our garbage in the streets, of spitting on the stairways, of discarding, chocolate wrappings or ice cream wrappings as we're walking along. There is this indifference to the public space, which is an appalling Indian characteristic. I mean, we are, in some ways, it's good that we are such an individualistic people, but in other ways, it's the corollary is this shocking disregard for other people. I recounted an episode involving my own family when my mother was she was on if you count the ground as ground, she was on the second floor of a 3-story house. And she used to get quite dismayed to see all the junk littering the stairways. So she told her maid, look, I'll pay you a little extra, can you clean the stairways as well? And she said, but why, madam, the stairs don't belong to you. So even the maid didn't expect anyone to have any sense of responsibility other than the owner of the building, and he didn't care because he wasn't living there. Now this is the kind of problem we have, which is why I think our public spaces are disgraceful. We have been, I would say, arguably the world's worst country in terms of waste management. We just do not process waste intelligently or systematically, something that so many other countries around the world have managed to do. And on top of that, we have litter everywhere. It's so difficult. I mean, if you are looking for a garbage bin in a public space to throw away a discarded something, you could wait a very, very long time. And most people don't want to sort of, walk around looking for this, so they just discard it wherever they are. I think that there's a combination of the lack of public amenities for waste disposal and this horrendous attitude of most of us, with the result that I'm very glad the Prime Minister raised awareness of Swachh Bharat, but I'm far from convinced that he's had any significant impact. A lot of toilets have been built, and that's good, but how they're being used, according to all the academic studies I've seen, a majority of the new toilets are not being used, either because people are not used to them, or because they don't have enough water or lighting or electricity or whatever it may be, and as a result, people are still defecating in the open in rural India. And that is unfortunate, to put it mildly. So I would say we're still a little way away from truly being the clean India that the Prime Minister talked about.
Dr. Tharoor, despite your really, really busy schedule, I was just hearing you this morning and how you like literally not only nation trotting, but globe trotting all the time. You're in the move and you're working for your constituency, you're meeting people. You yet find time to, write so prolifically. You've written so many novels, so many fictions. So what is the secret of this time management? I actually wonder whether God has created a special 28-hour capsule just for you.
I wish he would actually, or she would. No, I mean, the truth is that I don't sleep enough. I tend to have very long days, as any Lok Sabha MP will tell you. Your time is not your own. People constantly make demands on you all day long. So the only time that those demands stop is sort of after 10:30, 11 at night. And that's when I tend to sit down and write. I wasn't a late night person. I used to be an early morning person. But I realized that if I really want to be writing undisturbed, it has to be at night, and that's when I do it. I also write on planes. I write in all sorts of odd circumstances whenever I can, because that writing is important to me, and so I make it a point to do that. But it's also true, to paraphrase an American humorist of the 1940s, A.J. Liebling, who said, I write better than anyone who writes faster, and I write faster than anyone who writes better. So that's that's also part of the answer.
So does that also answer kind of work-life balance? You manage to have a great work-life balance?
No, I don't think I have a good work-life balance. It's all work. Partially because, as it happens, I don't have a life. My late wife has passed away. My children live in America, far, far away. So in that sense, personal life has suffered enormously. One occasionally makes time for friends, but even those are often crowded out by the large number of official social obligations or functional obligations in the evenings. And so the result is that I would be the first to concede that I do miss that aspect that most normal human beings enjoy, of having a family life and thinking about things other than whatever engages them professionally. But the counterpart of that is I have a two-profession balance, right? So I balance my professional life as a politician with my professional life as a writer, and one becomes a balance to the other.
And the time for Dr. Tharoor?
Not really. I mean, left to myself, there are lots of things I would want to do with myself, which would not, unfortunately, be productive enough to justify doing them right now. Maybe one day the time will come.
Dr. Tharoor, Indian politicians are pretty shy to use the social media, but you are the most followed leader in the social media. I've been literally following you for the past 3 months, and you're the most followed.
Mr. Modi overtook me 5 years ago, so he's way ahead.
So it also comes to the flip side of the trolls you got to face. So in your opinion, with all the disruptions in technology and overuse and effects of addiction of social media, is this media really a boon or a bane, especially recently with the Me Too campaign?
Well, on the social media generally, I would say that it's both a boon and a pain. It's certainly a boon in the sense that it's given us a new public square, a new public space where ideas can be exchanged, information can be shared, people are able to catch on to what's on other people's minds. There are young people now who don't bother reading newspaper anymore. They just look at the links their friends are tweeting and they get their sense of what's happening in the world. So all of that, I would say, broadly speaking, is a boon. On the pain front is the viciousness and trollery out there, which Twitter partly enables because of its permission to anonymity. Facebook, you can't be anonymous. At least you have to construct a pretty impressive fake profile that looks like a real person. Whereas on Twitter, you can have an egg for a picture and an absurd name, and you can just shoot abuses at people and nothing can be done. So the problem with that side of it is that it's brought out an awful lot of unpleasantness to which in the normal course of life, none of us would be or needs to be exposed. And that unpleasantness is something which we have to live with as the price of being on social media. The only consolation is that, what people used to think or say behind your back, somebody's now saying openly. So you know all the worst things that can be said about you because you can read them on your timeline in the morning. Whereas in real life, as we all know, people do gossip about you, people do mutter untruths about you or repeat rumors they've heard and so on. Human beings are like that. So in the past it used to happen quietly, and so at least openly to your face you were able to live a civilized existence. Today, instead of that happening, or maybe in addition to that happening, it's also mirrored in all the nastiness on social media. As for Me Too, I mean, I've actually tweeted this morning my views on it, because the clamor for my views was mounting to a point where I felt I should address it. Number one, I think it's not just about creepy sexual misbehavior, which it is, but it's also about differential power equations. Because if you look at these Me Too stories, they're all about producers and directors versus actresses. It's editors versus reporters. It's employers and bosses versus employees. So when you think about that power equation, what these people are doing is to try to exploit that differential in power sexually. And that's monstrous. It really is not acceptable. From the point of view of the victims, very often they're told, you let it go, let it be, brush it under the carpet, don't jeopardize your career, don't jeopardize your reputation. And that becomes so unfair to them. So social media, particularly with the safety of some years later, enables them to do the one thing to their tormentors that was done to them, which is to bring shame into the equation. You shame them publicly as they made you feel ashamed and guilty and miserable when you were younger. And I can fully understand why social media has been used to advance the Me Too issue. But the solution lies well beyond social media. It lies in really helping change our own culture into one in which we instill from a very young age respect for the equality, the dignity, the autonomy of women in the schools, in our homes, and in our workplaces.
It's very related to my next question, which is, women are most of the time, I would not say 100% of the time, because I think today the scenario is changing and women are doing extremely well. As my husband says, whenever he walks into a boardroom in a banking meeting, everyone will be sitting, waiting for the chairperson to come, and in walks that woman, the head of the board. So that's happening, but most of the time, women are underpaid, underutilized, and often undervalued. Will you like to change this at any point of time?
I think we can change it, first of all, by law, by making it illegal not to have equal pay for equal work. I think the only pay differential should be related to the kind of work you're doing and not to your gender. So that is something that's worth giving a thought to. Actually, when you said it, it suddenly struck me, I'm not sure there is a law. And if these employers aren't in violation of the law, but if indeed you're looking at inequality in compensation, then certainly we should fix that. But the other thing is obviously that we don't want to pass laws that act as a disincentive for women's employment. I remember some women telling me when some friends of mine wanted to make maternity leave, paid maternity leave, a 9-month thing. And they said, don't do that, because then men will never hire us. Employers will never hire us, men or women, because they'll say, now we've got to pay a 9-month salary for somebody who won't be working. Why should we? Better to hire a man who may not be as good, but who actually will never take that leave. So that kind of thing becomes a consideration. We need to ensure equality, but we need to make sure that benefits are balanced in such a way that they don't become a disincentive to hire women.
On 6 September 2018, the Supreme Court of India decided to announce that the application of Section 377 to consensual homosexual sex between adults was unconstitutional, irrational, indefensible, and manifestly arbitrary. This was great for the LGBT community, and you actually tried to pass this bill twice in the Lok Sabha, didn't get through. So how do you feel about this order now?
Well, I feel pretty good about it. I did actually say that because when I tried to pass the bill and the BJP's homophobes shouted me down and then voted against it, not once but twice, I said that, this is inevitable. It's going to come because you cannot keep denying human beings their dignity and their rights. Inevitably, it'll come later rather than sooner. You basically missed an opportunity to do the right thing now. But the right thing will come, if not through Parliament, then it'll come through the judiciary. And that is indeed what happened. Because as I tried to explain when I was introducing my bill, this is not about sex, it's about freedom. It's about the freedoms enshrined in our Constitution to fellow citizens of ours who are being denied the right to be themselves. Now, how can you do that? The government really should have no place in your bedroom, and the government should have no place in your kitchen too, by the way. And it seems to me that to let the government come in and start interfering in the personal lives of Indian citizens is actually a very, very dangerous and damaging step, which is the first step towards a big brother culture in our country. So I'm very glad the Supreme Court took the step it did, and I would like to see more and more areas in which we can actually free the space for human beings to be themselves, and that includes wives. Marital rape ought to be criminalized. It should be wrong that men feel they have a right to command their wives' bodies. That's also wrong. We need to make sure that we respect the right of every citizen of India, of any gender, any sexual orientation, any caste, any creed, to enjoy the full benefits conferred by our Constitution.
Absolutely. Dr. Tharoor, what is the craziest thing you have ever done so far?
I don't know, I've led a very boring life and never done anything terribly crazy, I'm sorry to say. Never jumped naked into a fountain or any of those, remarkable things that some people do when they're young and drunk. Somehow all that escaped me. I think I was an old fogey when I was young.
I think I should believe that. The 3 magical mantras which have dictated your approach to life.
3?
Magical mantras which have dictated your approach to life.
Well, as a parent, you always develop these mantras for your kids. I'm not sure you can really apply them for yourself. But the first one I always just tell my kids is never give up. I just say that, ultimately try. As long as you've made the effort, then you can't be blamed. But if you don't try, that's unforgivable. So never give up. Another one was be true to yourself. And that I even still say a version of that when I address high school and college graduates. I say that, basically be the best you that you can be. That nobody else can be a better you than you are, right? So be the best you that you can be true to yourself. You should know your own talents and your own abilities, and once you know them, then certainly it seems to me that you can at least attempt to fulfill them. Not everybody has the same level of talent, ability. Not everybody can come first in class. Not everybody can win the fastest race or sing the best song or even crack the best joke, but everybody has some talent. And if they can do that and do that well enough, and if they can do it in a way that at least makes them feel they haven't let themselves down, then it seems to me we have no business to expect anything more of any human being than that. And of course, the third one is the perennial favorite, which all of you doctors, I think, even swear an oath to: do no harm. Ultimately, none of us is necessarily going to make the world or the planet a better place for having been in it. But let's not at least make it a worse place. Let's not harm others. Let's not do things that willfully cause damage to other human beings. And thereafter, do what you want.
And do you push yourself beyond your comfort zone often?
Yes, I think yes and no. Let me put it this way. I don't take on things that I know I can't do. But the things I do take on, I try and do them extremely well, as well as I possibly can. So I don't, pretend to be what I'm not. I don't pretend to have skills or abilities I don't have. But the ones that God has been kind enough to bless me with, I will certainly work very hard to accomplish as best I can, and with as much conviction, energy, and attention and devotion as I can muster.
So mostly you do.
Mostly I do.
Okay, so that was my in-conversation with Dr. Tharoor. Now I've got something which social media has never, I have kind of literally followed him for the past 3 months, and I'm going to do something which has never been done before. Dr. Tharoor, you're going to be under rapid fire.
Uh-oh.
You
Right.
just have 15 seconds to think about this, and now we're going to see how you're going to answer this. My audience will judge whether the answer is okay or not. Maybe with a round of applause, with a good answer.
Well, I'm not sure I have a choice, but okay. Can I refuse to play? No.
No.
Go ahead, go ahead. You've
We've been
taken a lot
waiting
of trouble.
for 10, how many months? Half an hour for you to come, and for nearly 8 months for this morning to happen.
All right, here I am. So we've been going for 45 minutes, Renuka.
No, half an hour. I've kept time. And this is not going to be more than 5. He's trying to dodge away. 5 minutes maximum. Promise. Okay. My first question in the rapid fire. If you are stranded on an island for eternity, name one book you would need to have in your possession.
The Mahabharata, I think, because it really has the most extraordinary range of stories. First of all, it's the longest book in the world, so you're stuck for a very long time. You really want a very long book to go with. But secondly, it's got so many interesting things. It's got stories, it's got philosophies, it's got digressions, it's got ideas, it's got counter ideas. It's just such a rich thing. You know, for a while it was, now they've turned my mic off.
Okay.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
So for a while it was almost the National Library of India, because everything that people wanted to put into the, any story they wanted to tell, any lesson they wished to impart, they would insert into a retelling of the Mahabharata. So between about 400 BC and 400 AD, this is all that happened all the time. So I think the Mahabharata is a fairly safe bet.
Okay. Now, that was a good answer, but your answers need to be short.
Yes.
With a 15-second thinking time. What is something you got away with a child that your family still doesn't know about?
I don't think I ever got away with anything as a child. I'm terrible at it. No, honestly, you've really got me stumped. I can't give you an answer. I think I must have been a terribly unadventurous child. I don't think I did anything my parents didn't know
Are
about.
we going to applaud for that answer?
No, they don't believe it, but it's
No,
true.
they don't believe you. No one believes you. Okay, Dr. Tharoor, this is my favorite one. Please repeat after me. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
I knew this. I knew this was going to happen. Okay, what's the meaning of this?
Oh, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a word made up by Mary Poppins, right? To sing to the children that she was governess to.
Let's do it
And
together.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Something, 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 something. Quite atrocious.
Yeah, so that's a big round of applause.
La, 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 la.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
There you are. That's all I remember of it. None of the words, alas.
Okay, what's the most annoying kind of friend?
Most annoying kind of friend? I think somebody who doesn't give you your space. I mean, a good friend should know when you want to be left alone, and also when you want to be doing things that you don't necessarily require somebody having an eye over your shoulder, right? So I think the good kind, or the most annoying kind of friend denies you that space.
Okay. Okay, who's your celebrity crush?
Celebrity crush. Ooh, I've got to be very careful now. No, I think if I name a single one, I'll never hear the end of it. So I'm going, as the Americans say, I'm going to take the fifth, you know, for fear of incriminating yourself, you know.
I was hoping Shah Rukh Khan. It's okay.
That's your celebrity.
Okay, what separates true friends from just acquaintances?
Well, acquaintances actually basically are superficial relationships. Friendships have to involve a certain degree of affection, a certain degree of intimacy. That is, you share things with friends you don't share with acquaintances. A certain quantum of time, because normally with friends you want to be with each other, so you actually spend some time with each other. I think those are the kinds of things that separate a friendship from an acquaintanceship. There is sometimes also a sense of vulnerability. You could be more hurt by the betrayal or even indifference of a friend than you would be by that of an acquaintance. So that could be an extra point to add vulnerability.
Okay, if you eliminate one thing from your daily schedule, what would it be and why?
If I could eliminate one thing, sleep, then I could get more hours of work done.
Not a good answer for answering a doctor. We recommend 8 hours of sleep.
And I'm lucky to get 5, unfortunately.
If God would ask a question to you, what would it be? No, sorry, if you could ask God a question, what would it be? I've stumped you. I've stumped Dr.
No, the
Tharoor.
obvious answer is, why do you allow all the suffering in the earth, etc. But then as a good Hindu, I don't believe in God in that kind of this guy with a white beard who's sort of inflicting either suffering or blessings on the world. So to that degree, I have to imagine I'm somebody I'm not to be able to ask God a question because I'm not sure God exists in that form. I mean, God exists in the sense that there is a divine something that we don't all know or understand, have never seen. And we all imagine forms of God as means of reaching out to that divine spirit. But if that divine spirit took a personal shape, I suppose I'd say, why don't you come down to earth and set it right instead of sitting up there and letting us make a mess of it?
Okay. Okay. What is that one thing you really, really, really like to own?
Really like to? Own. I suppose it would have to be a sort of lifetime ticket to the Lord's cricket ground. A nice seat in the pavilion, sit all day and watch.
Wow, that's a good. Okay, have you ever had to hold your tongue even though you really wanted to say what was on your mind?
Very often. And increasingly so in Indian politics. Because quite often, I know that what I would say would get me into more trouble than is worthwhile. And second, because what I would say would be at variance with what my party would wish I would say. And therefore, I decided it's wiser not to say anything. This is not my natural instinct. It's a learned behavior that coming into politics over the years and seeing the consequences of being honest and candid has really taught me the importance of biting my tongue. Lots of lacerations.
And when is the time you actually got caught with your foot in your mouth?
Oh, according to the media, every second day.
If you could add any word in the dictionary, what would it be and what would it mean?
There is an interesting thought that comes to me from being from Kerala. There is no English equivalent for a particular Malayalam word, which I find a rather useful word, which is etramate, which means that if, let's say, 11 people are standing in a line and somebody wants you to meet the 11th person, and they say, my wife is standing in that line, can you go and deliver this message to her? All you would have to say is, etramate, which number is she in that line? And the answer would be, she padanonnamate, she's the 11th one, and then she's the 11th one to give. We have no such thing in English. Try and say it. You'll have to say something like, in which position in the line is she standing? There's no one word for it. So there's a word that the English language needs.
What is the most unusual thing in your wallet, pocket, or purse right now at this moment?
Well, I hope it's there because I change jackets, but I carry two sort of religious symbols that were given to me by different people at different times. One is a tiny shivling, which, I'm going to have to stand up to do this, I think. And the other, in keeping with the eclecticism of the Hindu spirit, is a crucifix and a rosary given to me by a nun who'd prayed for me. So I thought that when people sanctify something with their love, and there we are, there's the rosary, and I may end up with a pen drive instead of a shivling, but
We believe you, Dr. Tharoor, we believe you.
there it is. There's the shivling. So.
If your best friend wrote a book about you, what would the title be of that book?
I don't know. As long as it's not Floxinosi nihilabilification, I'm okay.
And then if it was your worst enemy who had to write the book, what would that title be?
Oh, that would be Floxinosi nihilabilification. I should have saved up the answer for that. I don't know. I've actually often wondered, what kind of. There's some biographies with brilliant titles, and so all the good ones are taken, I fear, because so many people have written biographies and autobiographies. I don't know, in something that captures the fact that one has led these sort of slightly parallel lives throughout one's life. Uh, One possibility that I used to joke in my family is the man with two horoscopes, because I was born in London, and a horoscope was cast then, and a horoscope was cast back in Kerala and my parents' villages, and the two don't match at all. So when I was marrying my son's mother, for example, both horoscopes were presented. One was grossly unsuitable, but the other was acceptable. And so I am the man with two horoscopes. You can choose the life that I'm supposed to be leading.
What's the best compliment you ever got?
I mean, I have to admit that in the profession you're in, you get an awful lot of compliments. So I've heard a few very nice things. But I think the one that moved me the most, because it stayed in my head now for 20 years, was when I wrote my book, The Great Indian Novel. A friend told me that her aunt, who was dying of cancer, would deliberately read only a few pages each night, because she was convinced that she looked forward so much to the next few pages that she would wake up alive in the morning. And there can't be a greater thing than that. And the sad end to the story is she did finish the book and she did die after that. So
That's so sad. And do you go to anyone for advice?
I actually have to admit, not in the life sense of the term. In politics, yes, I do seek political advice, because I'm still relatively new in the game, and I know I don't have the instincts of a politician. Most politicians in India have done nothing else all their lives. But when you asked me earlier about the foot in the mouth, I was reminded of this whole episode of my responding to a question on Twitter about the austerity drive of my government. Mr. Minister, will you travel cattle class? And I replied, yes, in cattle class, out of solidarity with all our holy cows. And then the dung hit the fan. And I went through all sorts of paroxysms of unpleasantness for the next few days, including some of my own party people calling for my resignation and so on, because of an innocuous phrase that I thought everybody knew, since I had heard it for 30 years in America, and here somebody was asking it in India, so I assumed it was widely known. And I didn't realize, A, it wasn't known, and B, how awful it sounds when it's translated into Hindi and Gujarati and Malayalam and everything else. And that's when I learned the wisdom of the old line of Shakespeare's, that the success of a jest lies not in the tongue of the teller, but in the ear of the hearer. And that ultimately is a very important lesson in politics, that it doesn't matter what your intention is. It only matters what other people see and how they perceive it. So one of the reasons in politics I do want to seek advice and need to seek advice is I know what I'm doing and I'm convinced of the virtue or the rightness of my cause, but others will be in a position to say to me, you don't realize this is how others will see it, how the voting public will see it, how your party will see it, how other parties' leaders will see it, and what can be done with what you are about to say or do. And that corrective mechanism often can't come from within one person's experience. You need others' views.
And that comes to my last question. Which is your favorite song? Because you've got to sing it also.
Because of?
Favorite song.
What did you say after that?
You got to sing it. You got to at least sing a line.
Actually, there's a song that I've been singing for quite some time, but after a very long gap. And it was a song that I first heard in the early 60s. And then in a somewhat romantic mood with my late wife, I resurrected, and she liked it. And thereafter, I've sung it 3 or 4 times. I don't mind sharing with all of you. My singing is not in the league of my speaking.
That's okay. There are a lot of people are going to join.
But anyway, it's a Ricky Nelson song called "I Need You." Anyone know it? You should ever think of leaving me, don't let it go too far. the love of a lifetime. Darling, that's what you are. I know I could never, ever stop loving you. No man is an island, and I need you, honest I do. One verse.
Wow. So there ends my rapid fire. How's he fared? Dr. Tharoor, for 10 minutes, we'll take some questions from the audience, and then I have a game which I'm going to play with the audience, and you're going to be the judge.
I'm going to be the judge?
Yes.
Oh my God.
So this, before that, we just take about questions from the audience for 10 minutes, and I would request Priya and Dipali to kindly moderate this session.
Okay. I have been hearing that India will be a superpower. Today I'm nearly 60. Will I ever live to see India as a superpower? Will my generation ever experience the pleasure of that? So I request Mr. Indira Kamareshwaran to stand up. So yeah, that's the question.
I'm afraid the answer is no, but I also don't think that it's a particularly realistic or sensible ambition. We can't be a superpower because we're still super poor. And we have enormous internal problems to overcome first. But I wonder why we need to be a superpower. What we need to do is create a country where every one of us is entitled to expect to lead decent lives, to have 3 square meals a day, to have a roof over our heads, to have a healthcare clinic within 5 kilometers max of our place of residence, to have schools we can send our children to have jobs where we can work satisfyingly and aspire to better things. All of these needs don't require us to be a superpower. There are many wonderful countries in Western Europe which have all of this and offer it to all their citizens and will never be superpowers or aspire to be them. So I honestly think that's not the right aspiration. I'd like us, of course, to be powerful enough that we're not kicked around, but I don't see any need to be a superpower.
This is a question from Ponchi Kanwar. Why the chasm between religion and philosophy today?
Sorry, between?
Why is there a chasm between religion and philosophy today? Why are we more into the ritualistic Purva Mimamsa kind of religion, and why can't we intellectualize it? Is metaphysics and philosophy amorphous to most?
May I request the questioner could kindly stand up? Oh, there she is.
Hi. Well, in fact, my book, Why I'm a Hindu, sort of addresses this, because I do believe that Hinduism, it's very difficult to draw a distinction between spirituality and philosophy. It's all there. But Hinduism acknowledges multiple ways of reaching out to the divine, and bhakti, or worship and ritual and going to temples and so on, is one part of it. It's one way. But Jnana Yoga, where you're actually reading and studying and appreciating philosophical insights, is an equally valid way. And Raja Yoga, which is meditation, which is the interiorization of your inquiry. I sometimes joke that, while other religions looked for God in the heavens, the Hindu looks for God within himself. That too is possible. And there's finally, of course, something your question doesn't address, which is karma yoga, actually doing service as a means of aspiring to the divine. Service to your fellow human beings is also a form of reaching out. So one could argue that all of these ways are equally valid. Some are stronger at some than the others, since not everyone can be an intellectual. They confine their practice or their understanding of religion to worshipping at temples, and to others, it's more the former than the latter. So I think both are possible, and both should coexist. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question here on the same topic. So this is a question from Mrs. Radha Parthasarathy. I request you to just identify yourself. Yeah. So the question is, do you condone what's happening in Sabrimala? Don't you think it is really necessary to tamper with traditions? And there are other ways to bring about equality to women? Are there more important issues to be addressed?
Yeah, it's a very tough question to answer, because on the one hand, there is a very valid argument that religious practice is a matter of faith, and it's for the faithful, and that others really have no place in judging what is appropriate or not. But then you have the counter-argument that says, by that logic, would we ever have abolished untouchability? Would we have ever allowed Dalits into temples? A lot of traditionalists in the 1920s and 30s and 40s were appalled at the laws that allowed Dalits into temples, saying this is polluting our temples. So you had traditionalists using religion to justify a practice that would shock our sensibilities today. Swami Vivekananda, as a Hindu Swami himself, attacked people justifying child marriage in the name of religion. He said, how can people call themselves Hindu sages and sadhus and justify an 8-year-old child being married off to an older man? This is not acceptable to me in the name of my religion. Which implies that all religions evolve and change as sensibilities and ideas come up. And in fact, the 19th century, the century of Vivekananda, of Dayanand Saraswati, of the Brahmo Samaj, and so many other movements, saw a lot of reforms in Hinduism, some of which came in reaction to British colonialism and the colonial presence here, and some of which came about because individual Hindus started thinking differently. The complication here is it wasn't something that happened from within the faith. It wasn't even a reformist movement. Let's say if suddenly the head priest of Shabarimala had decided that he was going to allow everybody in, that would have been a very different sort of thing from a situation in which a bunch of robed judges have made a decision. And that's the complication that faces the public in dealing with this. Personally, I am very much in favor of women's equality across the board, and I would feel that if an Indian woman wishes to go and worship in a particular place, she should not be prevented from doing so. By the way, for the same logic, a woman should be allowed into the Haji Ali Mosque in Mumbai, and there's a case on that going on as well. So you've got an issue here. But it's very clear after the verdict that large numbers of women, including apparently yourself and many other Hindu women in Kerala, have been upset by this because they feel that something that is sanctified as a practice is being violated by a judicial ruling. And it's going to be, I think, a practical challenge to implement this ruling because there are large numbers of people who are prepared to literally lie on the paths and prevent people from coming in. So it's not going to be easy. It's an intractable question. I have my personal view, but as a public representative, I'm fully sensitive to the concerns you've expressed. In some ways, the onus was on the court to decide the question of whether the principles of constitutional rationality and legal procedure would apply to matters of religion and faith. In this particular case, they decided it would. One judge dissented, but 4 decided it would. And once that decision had been made, then I think there was no possible conclusion other than allowing those women who want to go, because the Constitution does not permit discrimination between genders. So once you decide the Constitution applies, then this outcome has to be the inevitable corollary. But as I say, we have a long way to go before we see this implemented. There's a lot of ferment going on right now in Kerala.
Thank you. Thank you, dear friends. Due to paucity of time, I would not be able to take another question. I've just got this very, very short game for you. It's a fun game, never done before in Dr. Tharoor's interview or in conversation. So I'm taking the liberty to conduct this game, and you're going to be the judge. First of all, I would require all of you to kindly place your mobiles in the center of the table, please.
So no one can cheat.
No one can cheat. There are these secret agencies going around to see whether you're going to. It's a request, no mobiles allowed, no mobiles to be referred to. So the game is very simple. We are aware of Dr. Tharoor's command and master over the language, and I have been going through thousands of his tweets. I picked up a little words from here and there. So the point is I'm going to announce the word. All you have, please do not answer in chorus because you'll miss out an opportunity to come on stage and take an autograph book by him with a photograph. So please raise your hand, and Priya or Dipali, or would be coming to you. And okay, if you do not answer the question, or if I don't get any hands raised, I will put that word in the sentence that he's tweeted and try to let you guess. And if that still doesn't work, I'll give you 3 options. Fair enough? Yeah. Ready? Okay. Dipali, Priya, ready? Okay. The first word, Dr. Tharoor, you're going to be the judge. The first word is rhodomontade. Have I got that right? Rhodomontade. Okay.
Just hold
No, just wait. She's coming there. Yeah.
I heard I sort of read your tweet, but is it something like rogue? No? Okay.
Sorry. Not a rogue.
Okay, I'm going to put it in the sentence. I choose my words because they are the best ones for the idea I want to convey, not for the most obscure or rhodomontade ones. That's clue number 2. I mean, clue number 1, actually.
That's it?
You want to read it again? I choose my words because they are the best ones for the idea I want to convey, not for the most obscure or rhodomontade ones.
Appropriate.
Mm-mm.
No?
Okay, there's...
Not just for the sake.
Okay, now I'm going to...
Run of the mill?
There was a hand at the back there too.
Excuse me? Run of the mill?
Boring?
Not boring. Oh dear. No.
Okay, I'm going to give you the 3 options. Option A.
Run of the mill?
No.
Okay.
Dumb-witted people?
Sorry?
Dim-witted or dumb-witted, whatever.
Not dim-witted. No.
Okay, the 3 options. Option A, simplicity. Option B, to fail. Ladies, please raise your hands and no chorus. Option 3 is boastful. Shh.
Second option, not to fail.
No.
It's boastful.
It's the third one, boastful.
Boastful.
It's boastful, vainglorious, complicated. You know, a rhodomontade is a very complicated, boastful way of saying something, using lots of...
Sapna, please come on to gather a gift from Dr. It's an autographed book of the Era of Darkness
Shall
from
we do
him.
those at the end? Otherwise it'll
You want to
take
do it
much
in the
longer.
end? Okay, we'll get the winners at the end.
The winners can come up at the end and we can do them one
So
after.
we have a tie actually. Chitra also said.
Chitra also, okay. Oh dear. Okay. Farrago. Created quite a stir in national media.
A mixture of things.
A confused mixture, but yeah, a jumble.
Yeah. Bhavani.
Wow, Bhavani, that's right. I love this one. Snollygoster.
Snollygoster.
You want the sentence? Clue 1? Okay. Don't trust a word he says. He's a real snollygoster. Please raise your hands.
Is it sort of deceptive? Deceptive, deceiving?
Not quite. Sort of partly, but no, not quite.
Bluffer?
Not quite. It's actually a very specific term. So
Liar.
no, all these elements are there, but there's a very specific definition.
Two-faced? Is it two-faced?
Two-faced, getting closer,
A
but
rumor monger.
not exaggerated.
Okay, I'll give you the 3 options.
A rumor monger.
Gossip monger?
No, the 3 options would be 1, a ruffian, B, an unprincipled politician, and 3rd, a very weird person.
Weird person?
Who are you giving the mic to?
Unprincipled politician.
That's right. A shrewd and unprincipled politician is a snollygoster.
That's right, a shrewd and unprincipled politician. Okay, the next one, calumny. Calumny. Did I get the pronunciation
Calumny,
right?
yeah.
Calumny. Calumny.
Calumny.
I know what it means. Deepali, there's somebody behind.
There's someone there, right there. It's right there.
A mistake or a fault?
Not quite, no.
It's abuse. It's abuse. Calumny.
Abuse is not far off. It's close enough. It's actually, it's a false accusation.
Yeah.
Slander. Slander.
Slander.
Okay, my last one. This is my favorite. Floxin or synhilipilification. Floxin or synhilipilification. I got the pronunciation right.
Floxinosin inhibitofication.
Yeah, this I have.
Hi.
You know, just saying something that it's not really important, or it's, you know, it's kind of.
That it's worthless.
Yeah.
The act of estimating something to be worthless, or someone to be worthless. That's
Yeah,
the
I
act
think
is called floxinosin.
so. Due to paucity of time, we wind this round here, and I would request the winners to come one at a time to take a picture and the gift from Dr. Tharoor.
For a wonderful morning. Thank you for inspiring us with this eloquent conversation, sound logic, and allowing us to pick our minds. We are thrilled that we had the opportunity to interact with you today. Thank you, Dr. Renuka David, for doing an excellent job in moderating the session and bringing him in. Thank you, Radiant Group, for sponsoring the event. Thank you, Dipali and Priya, for being a fantastic MC and helping in coordinating this event. Thank you, Rachna Kumar, for putting together a fabulous meal today. Thank you, Hayat, for the hospitality. Thank you, Sanskriti, for being our gifting partner. And thank you, members, for being here and making this event such a grand success.